Play like a champion today. It's the Fighting Irish Squad Show. Everything Notre Dame Fighting Irish every week. Breaking down the biggest news and game-changing plays the way only Locked On Podcast Network can. Wake up the echoes. The Fighting Irish Squad Show starts now.
Welcome into the Irish Squad Show here on the Locked On Irish YouTube and audio channels. Joe George, Allison Hayes, and Reggie Brooks here with you today. We'll be joined by, on video, we'll have a short piece from Alan Pinkett, who's not with us live today, Chris Zorich, an interview that Allison did. Obviously, we're going to talk about the life, the legacy of Lou Holtz, who passed this week. And I'll start here. Reggie, thank you for doing this. I know this is not an easy subject to talk about for anyone, but specifically for you. So I want to say, as you know, coworker, thank you still for doing this show today. And you know, we're obviously thinking of you and everyone that played for Coach Holtz and that Coach Holtz, you know, impacted, whether it's people like me who just was on TV and loved watching him. And like, that's my memory of Coach Holtz, is I just loved watching him on TV and hearing stories from my dad. And that's why I'm a Notre Dame fan, is because of my dad. And, you know, and that goes back to Coach Holtz and before and everything. But so Reggie, I'll kind of let you just take the floor to start, you know, favorite memories, how you're doing right now, and just everything like that.
Well, it's actually, you know, I've known that this was coming, you know, for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and still not processing that he's gone. You know, I'm, you know, waiting to get a call and him chewing my ass out, or, you know, like, what are we doing, Reg? And you know, it's not going to happen. And, you know, so, my parents passed, and the one thing that people, you know, whether they know Coach or not, he was about the little things, doing little things the right way, treating people the right way. And again, don't get me wrong, he was a bear to play for. I mean, he was a perfectionist. He was constantly pushing himself to get the best out of you. But it was, you know, I've learned that a lot of the things that, you know, he would get on us about, it was not about the game necessarily. It was about life. You know, how do you treat people, you know, and how do you do things, and what are you doing when people aren't watching? You know, the level of integrity, and, you know, how do you treat the smallest fan? It doesn't matter. You treat people the right way, no matter stature, you know, race, creed, whatever, walk in life. How you treat people matters. And he would always talk about this, about being significant versus being, special or seen. He was about being significant, and being significant was not about you. It was about how you made other people feel. How did you lift other people up, and, you know, move people into a greater sense of self. And, you know, when you're 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, you're not, you know, it's like, what is this dude talking about? And he would say, he's like, you guys, I mean, you won't get it right now, but in the future, it'll resonate, you know, as a father, as a husband, you know, brother. These things are someone in the community, an employee or an employer. How you treat people treat people matters. Not of when you are seen, it's when the things you do for others when you're not being watched, when you think you're not being watched, but someone's always watching. And, you know, significance is not, again, it's not about self. You know, you think about the game of football, team is not about self. You have to get outside of you and your own, you know, bravado or whatever, and be someone that can be counted on by the guy next to you. You know, and I always say this, football is the consummate team sport because it requires 11 guys to execute at a high level to make a play work. And that's whether offensively or defensively. In any letdown, any, mental error, And he would have this thing he would go over before every game. It's called How We Win. And one of the things that was in there was togetherness. And it's like, what does that got to do with anything? Because, you go out there, perform your job and do your thing. Everything's great. No, togetherness extends beyond the football field. When you love someone or you have a commitment to someone that goes beyond my own self, I want to be successful. So for me to be successful, the guy next to me has to be successful. I'm not going to do his job. He's not going to do mine, but we're going to trust each other enough that we're going to do what we're supposed to do. And that's where you get that perfect play, and he would take us through these visualization exercises before every single game. Every Friday, he would have us lay down and, visualize. He would always start with visualizing ourselves sitting by a stream with Jesus Christ holding our hand. I mean, that was always a part of it. And, and it was like I said, just this relaxation sensation. And a lot of guys would fall asleep because I know I fell asleep quite a few times. But he would only talk to us about 15, 20 minutes. And he would talk and go through an offensive play, a defensive play, and a special teams play. And, one of the plays that we've practiced all week. And he would see yourself making a block, see yourself making a catch, see yourself making a run in that game, or shedding a block and, blocking a punt or returning a kick. And I'm not even exaggerating. I can't recount how many times the play that he would talk through with us would actually occur on the field. I mean, it was kind of freaky. It was like, okay. I mean, like he would name out who would make the block here. He would call the player's name that would, make the catch. And it was like, and then, and a lot of times it's Rocket returning kicks. And it would happen. And we was like, damn, okay. He called that exactly how it played out. But he would always talk about this thing of the mind controls the body. And everybody focuses in on the physical aspect of the game. Coach Holtz was always about the mental aspect. He would run us hard. He would, drive us, and he was always playing mind games. But he knew if your mind can see something, it will materialize in what you did. No matter how impossible it may seem, if you can convince yourself in your mind that you can do something, it would come to fruition. And, he wasn't the biggest guy, but it was crazy how much this little fella had such control over, 300-pound guys, 6'5", 5'11". It didn't matter. And you were just entranced by his presence, and he had a presence about him. I remember the 1988 national championship, 25th reunion of the national championship year. And, we're grown men. I mean, we got wives and kids. And at a reception, he came in with Mrs. Holtz. And it was crazy how guys would just come to attention and oh, coach is here. And he just walked in the room and everybody snapped too. And everybody's like, and the wives were looking around like, what in the heck is going on here? But he had such a presence about him that, he wasn't big in stature, but his presence loomed large in whatever you did. And even, years later, you're always, I don't want to disappoint coach, and he was always one to ask, like, said, what can I do for you? And I'm just been getting fan correspondence and about him, taking a picture or doing a cameo of happy birthday for I don't know how countless people. And it's like, and they're sending it to me. I was like, I don't know who you are, but it just goes to show you the importance of the human condition that he understood. And, he's going to be missed. He is going to
Reggie,
be missed.
let me ask you this. A lot of folks know, obviously, that you played for Coach Holtz at Notre Dame, but a lot of people don't realize that you were actually working very much one-on-one with him over the last several years through Holtz's Heroes Foundation. Just what was your role? What is your role? And I believe you're the only fully employed, full-time employee on the Holtz's Heroes staff. And I know every time he came to campus, if you saw Coach, you saw Reggie with him.
Well, so we have this organization called Holtz's Heroes Foundation that used to be Lou's Lads Foundation. And it was birthed out of Coach wanting to do for his former players. And a lot of people don't, they can forget about, that the guy that, ran the touchdown, made the tackle and all these things when you play at Notre Dame. And you can kind of lose track of them when they're gone. Well, what happens to those guys? Where are those guys at? What are they doing? So I basically track on our former players, seeing where they are, but also the importance of, checking on their families. We've had a number of guys that have passed away, and that was kind of the impetus of it. It's like, guys were committing suicide, whether it was drugs or alcohol, having struggles, mentally, physically. And Coach it just really got to him that, how many of these guys we were losing at such a young age. I mean, we're talking like, 30s and 40s. And it was, birthed out of, hey, how can we be a support system to former athletes, in their struggles? And also the scholarship program of Coach was really big on the importance of education and having the opportunity, to support, first generation college students. And so, excuse me, it was in that again, that team mentality to support others, in those trying times. And people like, well, what does a former player need my assistance for? You'd be amazed at how many people are in your community, that they're part of that community that you're in, because we have guys all over the country. And we make a point of reaching out and being a support system and being a teammate for a number of guys, but also in their communities through the Bread of Life food drives that we do across the country. And again, it's the little, like I said, the little things you do. We're not looking for accolades, a pat on the back. We just want to, honor Coach's legacy of love, trust, and commitment. Do what's right, do the best you can, and show people you care. Just live that on a daily basis. And a lot of times, like I said, as a teammate, you lose track of guys, but it's amazing when you have the opportunity to reconnect with them, but also reconnect with their families. Stay connected with the University of Notre Dame, and that, what would you fight for? We got to fight for each other, not something that's going to, some grand gesture. A lot of times that guys lose jobs, or, they fall on hard times financially or hard times physically. It was a number of guys that have, mental health issues or TBIs, and we work to support them by helping usher them to the resources and then covering those costs because, as we all know, healthcare is crazy right now. But just to be able to be that support system until that individual can get back on their feet. Because again, when someone is, lifted up, they remember that, they pay it forward, but also, hey, this is something that you can do in your community and impact more than just an individual. You're impacting the community because that individual can be more effective and more engaged with their own community and do more in, their walk of life and have purpose. It's about, dignity and respect of, hey, you're down right now, but hey, you got teams that we're going to help you get out. So it's fourth quarter. Hey, we're on the goal line. We're going to be there to help you punch it in.
Reggie, I know you got to let you run here at noon, but since we've started doing this show, whenever Coach Holtz comes up, there's something you always say. You always say ass chewing. It always that it happens. What'd you do? What's your number one that you think of when you think of Coach Holtz? What's your number one thing that you did, and if you deserved it now that you look back on it?
We had this thing where he had this list of like how you win. And one of those things was mental errors. Again, he was really big on mind control, if you will. And I was a freshman, and the freshmen came in, a week before the upperclassmen. And so it was myself and Dorsey Levens. We were the only running backs in that, recruiting class. So, and, as you know, Coach Holtz loved to run the football. So we're going, it was just him and I carrying the ball. And I still disagree that I went the wrong way. But he said I did, and he said it in a very visceral manner when I'm turning around, after the play, because you had to finish the run. We were required to run at least 10, 15 yards downfield on every run. So I'm coming back, and he just lights into me, yeah, Reggie, you ask it. And I'm thinking like, whoa, I just got here. It was like, what is this? Because he was in my mom and dad's living room telling them how great I was, and oh my gosh, and this and that. And I'm like, and I'm a little pissed at my brother, by the way, because never let me know any of this. Because he used to get thrown out of practice all the time, apparently. Him and Ricky Waters, because he would call Tony Ricky Brooks. No, it was Tony Waters and Ricky Brooks. So if one of them got kicked out of practice, the other one had to go too. Because he was not about any mistakes. And if you made a mistake, you're going to catch hell. But that was my first, instance of receiving a tongue lashing from Coach Holtz. And it was like my first week on campus.
The first of many?
Actually, no, I learned real quick because the guys in front of me, I'm not going to do that. Now, I did, my senior year, I got kicked out of practice, but I was, I held on to my guns because we had a play that we were practicing, and he came over to individual and changed the blocking scheme during individual. So when we got to team, we ran it and I executed and it didn't work. And he was like, damn it, Reggie, we didn't block his head block it like that. That's not how we coach you do it. So he lights me up, and I'm like, no, you came down there. And the running back coach is looking at me like, yeah, just let it go. I didn't let it go, and I got kicked out of practice. Wasn't too upset about it because it was one of those, it was like a Tuesday, so it was a hard practice. So I was like, I'm just got to go inside and because you didn't want to get kicked out of practice because if you didn't practice, you don't play. So, but I felt good. This was I was mid-season, so I was feeling myself a little bit. And I said I had some pretty good yards. So I was like, you ain't going to not play me. But, I did apologize. It was like, Coach, because you don't embarrass Coach in front of everybody because he wasn't going for that.
It's just, I guess, to wrap here then with you, Reggie, just your, final thoughts on, his legacy, just not just at Notre Dame, but South Carolina, Arkansas. He coached for 45 years in the NFL and college. It's started in 1960 and went to 2005. Just how you view him, now he's passed, and even before, just what his legacy is as a coach.
Well, for me, the legacy is the players, his former players, and I've had the opportunity to speak to former players at different schools, so not just at Notre Dame. And there's a common thread there. It's hey, this was not about a game. This is about life. How do you impact someone, 30, 40 years later? And one of the things the coach would say is hey, give me 4 years and I'll be there for you for the next 40. And he honored that. And that was one of the things that you learn to honor towards others is that, hey, wow, he was consistent in his message for those 40 something years. And you build a bond and a connection with those individuals through those lessons taught about it from a game. So a game has taught so many life lessons through Coach Holtz. And, I can't tell you how impactful he has been, not only to us as former players, but to our families. The guys that have passed, he stays connected with their families. That was one of the things he was adamant about. You stay connected with those families so they know how special their dad was and how important it is to be a community, to be a family, and to support one another. And I think that's his legacy, that of teaching the importance of loving each other and being there for each other, not just for a space and time, not for 4 years, but for a lifetime.
Reggie, thank you again for doing this today. We appreciate it. We know you got to run, and as you are meeting with people, and we're thinking of all of you, and we'll be the four of us will be back on Monday, and we'll continue to talk about Coach Holtz and about this offseason and this next season, because I think this goes to what Alan always says is leave no doubt. I think there's a little more pressure on this football team this coming season now. So it's a live up to the Coach Holtz standards. So Reggie, thank you. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we'll take our first break here. When we get back, Allison and I will continue here on the Irish Squad Show. Today's episode of the Irish Squad Show is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book an appointment today. All right, Allison. So obviously, look, it's a lot to talk about with Coach Holtz. There's, as Reggie talked about, the man of who he was. Everyone's got stories, it seems, and we'll play a video from Alan here coming up at the end of this segment. Chris Zorich, you did an interview with him that we'll play today as well to talk about Coach Holtz. And I guess, before we get into maybe your memories, I do have one question, because I know as we get into this business, there's always people you want to talk to, and you get comfortable doing interviews with players and coaches and athletes. But there's certain people that, like, I know I've done interviews with that I'm just like, I cannot believe I'm doing this right now. What do you remember, like, the first time you interviewed Coach Holtz? Like, how nervous were you? What was that like? And just your relationship with you and what it was like when you got the chance to talk to him.
Well, it's always one of the bittersweet parts of someone passing away is it allows you to sort of go back and look at photos. And I've been this whole last couple of days, I've been digging up old interviews that I have with him and old photographs with him. And I don't have the very first one, unfortunately. And I would guesstimate it would have been, and I mean, I was green, out of college, young, and a little intimidated, but also probably a little naive as well, which is always kind of a good thing. You don't know what you don't know. So, he was doing some type of a public appearance and speaking here in the Michiana area. And I had the opportunity to go and ask him for an interview. And at that time, he didn't have anyone with him. So, you had to kind of get up the gumption to go up and just, even tap him on the shoulder like, Coach. And he said, sure. And I had honestly also just watched like a clip that had gone viral of him getting pretty upset and annoyed that it was taking a reporter so long to get his microphone on. And so then you're like, oh my gosh, how is this going to go? But, and I'll be totally honest. I mean, he couldn't have been more gracious and understanding. And I'm young, I'm trying to set up the tripod and set up the camera and do the microphone, all this stuff by myself. And he was very patient with me. And I was nervous and intimidated, but at the same time, I mean, the minute you hear him speak, he sort of disarms you in a really positive way. And, you can listen to him talk and just read the phone book for an hour and be completely captivated by what he was saying. And so, but what stood out the most for me in that experience, the very first time, was, while I'm getting things set up, I don't know if it was to make me feel more comfortable or if he genuinely cared, but he started asking me questions about myself. Where was I from? Did I grow up a Notre Dame fan? Things like that. And so I just really appreciated that, because I'm in the business of, I'm the one asking everybody else questions. And so it was nice to have someone who, in his position, who he probably, he didn't need to care about me or where I'm from or how I grew up, but he took that time to do that. And it made me feel instantly more comfortable. And it allowed me to feel comfortable asking him the questions that I needed to ask. And so, years and years down the road, had more opportunities to get to interview him as well. And I think I was just as excited every single time, even when at one point I had done 4 straight years in a row. And on that 4th year in a row, I was just as excited, butterflies in my stomach, as I was that very, very first time, almost 20 years before.
Yeah, it's, there's certain people that I think, especially in the college football world, that kind of stand above the rest in terms of, like, when you think about what it means to be a college football coach and just have, like, your legacy impact. And I think about, for me, Lee Corso, Coach Holtz, Bear Bryant, Nick Saban kind of is in that category now, honestly, of just like guys that define college football that so many fans have respect for. I was looking at some of the stuff today just to kind of make sure I have my, everything in line. And it's, led 6 different programs to bowl games, the only coach to ever do that. The only coach to have 4 different teams end up in the top 15 throughout his career. Obviously, the national championship with Notre Dame. There's so many things about his legacy as a coach, but it's been really cool and teaser for people who are listening now. Between Reggie, what we just heard, and then what you're going to hear with Chris Zorich coming up, it's very clear that someone like me that never got the opportunity to talk to Coach Holtz, it's not necessarily about football. It's about the other stuff. It's about making sure your players are good and teaching life lessons. And as Reggie was talking about, making sure the families are good when players pass away and all that stuff. So his legacy, I think, to the average person is a football coach. And I think as we'll learn more and people, the more people talk, it's just more than that. It's just more than a football coach. It's just the person and the impact that he made on so many people's lives.
Yeah. And when you would talk to him, if you did ask him a question, he would always deflect it, deflect the attention away from what he did. And it was about, when I had a chance to talk to him, he always wanted to talk about his wife, Beth. And I thought that was really special. And, really giving her credit for all of the support that she gave him and their children throughout the years. But he would give credit to his players. He would give credit to the other coaches. And I think that goes to what Reggie was saying, where it was, how do you treat people when others aren't looking? And that's not to say that Coach Holtz wasn't, he got a little feisty, to say the least. And I saw that with my own eyes too. And it is funny because he is such a little bitty guy. And that was something I would like to ask Reggie about, or when we talk with Frank or next week and some of his other players, is just, they talk about him being such a little guy, but yet he could completely command a room. And there's so many people in this business who are trying to do that. And some do it successfully and some just don't. And so I would love to get their impression of, why was he able to command the room in that way? And there were times where he would get gruffy. We've got the, picture of him grabbing the collar of Chris Zorich and, getting up in players' faces, and he's this little guy. But at the end of the day, I think it was because you knew that he genuinely had love for his players. When he said he loved them, when he said he would be there for them, he absolutely meant it, and he backed it up. And I think that speaks so much louder than any words ever can.
Yeah, a lot of the off-season plans for the show are going to change now. We're going to have a lot more people on to talk about Coach. I know I texted a friend of mine who works here in sports radio in Houston, who's going to come on with us at some point. He went to college. He was actually friends with Liz. He played Lou's son in a silent film she produced. And he watched the OJ chase with Lou
Oh.
And so I'm like, I'm like, Sean, you got to come on just to tell us, like, because that's like such a one of a kind experience. So like, we're gonna have a lot of stories this off season, and people that come on to tell us just like their experience with Coach Holtz. And again, in just a couple minutes, we'll play a story from Alan, who obviously didn't play with them, but we'll have that coming up, and against Zorich coming up here in just a little bit. I do, one thing I mentioned there, Reggie, one kind of Notre Dame current question. I do feel like this adds another layer of pressure to the football team this year, and I think in a really good way. And it's gonna be really exciting this year in a way, and sad at the same time how they honor Coach Holtz throughout the season. But as Reggie mentioned, I don't know if Coach Holtz knew that his time was coming, but the fact that he was at the Arkansas game, it's like to have that game there and see in the suite, Reggie was there, and you've got Arkansas players, Notre Dame players kind of blending together and being there. It's cool you got to be there for for A&M and Arkansas and Miami and be involved in this last year of a Notre Dame season. And Reggie was saying before we started how he was still pissed that they didn't make the playoff. And I was like, well, I don't blame him, because we're all pissed. Like we're all still mad that it didn't. But yeah, I do feel like it kind of raises the pressure a little bit around the football team this year.
Well, one, I do think that, he was realistic, and I had talked with him the last few years, and every year I'd always ask him about his health, and, you could see it getting dramatically more difficult for him to get around when he was on campus, and went from, him walking into the interview to him being led in with help to him, using the walker, to him, literally just sitting down and everybody coming and going around to him instead of him having to get up and move around. And, he had told me, I don't know how many more years I can come back. And he would say that every year. I don't know. This might be my last year coming back. And so I think he was very aware of that. And, I think that was one of those gifts that when you have, we never know exactly when our time is, but, he did know that his health was starting to fail him. And so I think he took advantage of those opportunities when he had them. And using the word pressure, I don't know if that is, and I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, maybe pressure is not the right word.
The team will feel pressure so much, but I think it will be an added sort of benefit or bonus that we know they're going to be playing for him. And maybe it's not even specifically the players so much as it will 100% be Notre Dame fans that, everything that he has lived for and done will never be forgotten. And, for this team to be able to kind of carry that on in his memory and in his legacy, I think it just makes it even more special.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say what I said at the beginning, obviously, for me, I think of him just like on TV. But I loved Lou on TV. It was it's fun. Even like Pat McAfee show has one of the guys who does the Lou Holtz, and they did it to him, which was very funny. The Ryan Day stuff was very funny, but it's like he was great there too. So it wasn't just the man, the coach. He's good on TV. Like he was, I enjoyed it. Like I think of him and Corso as guys that like. It was always kind of whoever you're watching on when college football games are going on. It's you want to hear what they wanted to say, and what that's like right around probably when he started doing TVs, like right when Vince Young probably won the national championship game. So it was a great time. It's through the Brady Quinn era and all that stuff, but he was great at that too. Like you can't like it just adds to his legacy of what he was as a coach, a person, and a TV analyst.
Well, and you'll hear coming up from Chris Zorich, and he shares, something so that he knew how to motivate people, and he knew how to use and push those buttons, and he did that to his players, but he also sort of did that in his role in TV as well, right? He was, and politically, as well, he was a pot stirrer in that sense, where he knew how to get emotion out of people, good, bad, or otherwise, and so that does make for compelling interviews and compelling TV and things like that, because he was interesting, and he knew how to, evoke those different emotions, whether it was getting you fired up, excited, or getting you fired up, pissed off, but that's a gift in itself to be able to get something like that out of other people. And so, yeah, absolutely. He was so much fun just to be around and to watch and to listen and to, some of the people in our area, Bob Nagel is a legendary broadcaster in our area, and he could do a spot on impression of Lou Holtz. And so a shout out to Bob on that. But, he was a character. He was larger than life, the small person in stature, but just a larger than life personality. And someone we'll all just miss and always remember for his impact that he's had on the game and on so many people's lives.
All right, let's hear from first. We'll play a clip that Alan made for us because he couldn't join us live today. So you'll hear that first. We'll take a break, and then when we get back, you'll hear an interview that Allison did with Chris Zorich. We'll do that right now here on the Irish Squad Show.
Well, we lost a great man and a very good coach this week, talking about the passing of Coach Lou Holtz. Can't say enough about his coaching prowess, where he coached at, and how successful he was, and really have to admire what he did at Notre Dame. He reestablished a winning tradition at that school. I didn't get the chance to play for him, but me in not playing for him allowed me to see how great a man he was just by looking at the players that played for him. Those guys have a certain aura about them, not just because they won a national championship, but they've got great camaraderie and they're close. And most of them went on to be very, very successful. And that's the great man aspect that I think Lou Holtz delivered to the guys that played at Notre Dame. But I had a couple of, interactions with Holtz that make me think of him as a great man. When I left school, which I had Jerry Faust as my coach, and my eligibility was up, and Lou Holtz came in right after. He actually, when I left school, I had the rushing record, the scoring record, and a number of other records. And Coach Holtz caught me walking on the quad one day, and he said to me, Alan, as long as I'm coach, your record will never be broken because no one guy will ever get the ball that much. And he was right, because it took another coach coming in, Bob Davey, giving the ball to Autry Denson over a 4-year span to have to break my rushing record. Of course, I always tell people the ball wasn't heavy. It never was heavy, but it was going to take somebody running the ball consistently for 4 years to break my record because they gave me the ball so damn much. But I appreciated that, and he wasn't lying when he said it. But the second interaction actually meant a lot more to me. I had gone on to the NFL, was in, played 6 years in Houston, and then in 1992 got traded to the New Orleans Saints. And on August 1st, 1992, I blew my knee out, was out for the year. And at some point during that season, early during that season, I get some mail. And it's from Lou Holtz. And he wrote a note. It was handwritten, just said, hey, thinking about you. And found some pictures that, thought you might like to have. And, that was such a nice touch because I was long gone from the university at that point. And he had no ties to me. But he took the time to write a handwritten note to me. I'm sitting in New Orleans eating all kinds of gumbo and jambalaya and all that good food, but was really down in the dumps because I was out for the season with a torn ACL. But it meant a lot to me to receive a note from him and to see some pictures just to make me feel good. And that's why, like I said in the beginning, we lost a great man because that's not something he didn't have to do. He never coached me. He didn't have any ties to me, but he was that great of a man that he knew that, I probably needed a little lift and he supplied it. And, I will forever be grateful for those two interactions with Coach, and I just pray for the family and all the players that played for him, because he really did embody the 40-year experience of going to Notre Dame instead of the 4-year experience. And may he rest in peace.
Today's episode of the Irish Squad Show is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed sponsored jobs help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, and more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go into Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Today's show is also brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Welcome to the 5 Hour Energy flavor draft with 18 different flavors to choose from, including new options like confetti craze, fruity rainbow, or cotton candy, and there's something for everyone. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and I've got my number one pick ready to go. For me, it's strawberry banana. It's a tropical delight with strawberry, a taste that goes in everything from smoothies and milkshakes to cakes and ice cream. Got that soft, mellow banana finish, smooth, creamy fruit profile, reminiscent of a fruit smoothie. It's why it is my go-to, because it tastes, like I said, so many things that I eat or drink, honestly, on a daily basis. 5 Hour Energy has shots that give you a boost with zero energy. Lots of upcoming flavors planned as well. So maybe some ones that you can think of might be on the way. Find your new favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots, available online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. All right, right now, Allison Hayes on Twitter or on X, Facebook, YouTube, got a bunch of interviews and things, stories about Lou Holtz that you can check out as well. But right now, we're going to play for you an interview she did with Chris Zorich, a college football Hall of Famer that played for Coach Holtz.
It has to be tough. We've known for a while that he was getting older and that time was, of the essence for Coach Holtz, but it doesn't make it any easier when we finally hear the news. What are the thoughts that are going through your mind when you found out about Coach, and how are you feeling right now?
Well, I mean, kind of like what you mentioned. I mean, you hear when he makes that move to hospice, that you know that something will happen. It's just a matter of when. And regardless of knowing what hospice is, you're hoping that you don't get the call. So I mean, we wound up getting the call, and it just, you think about kind of what he's done for not only me, but like as for players. But I'm hearing all these different stories about kind of non-football stories that people may not know. They ran into him. And I tell stories about there's a young man who was thinking like in 7th or 8th grade, wanted to go to Notre Dame. And his mom was like, well, we don't know anybody. He was like, well, I know Lou Holtz. And this kid writes Holtz a letter in 7th grade. And he's like, I want to get to Notre Dame. And so, Coach Holtz responded back to him, and they kept in touch over the years. And the kid gets admitted. And, years later, the kid comes up to Coach Holtz at an appearance, says, you're not going to remember me, but my name is, and he told him the story, and his name, he said, like, John Smith. And the guy was stunned, like, what? And he's like, oh yeah. And he like literally talked about the whole conversation they've had over the 5, 10, 6 years, whatever it was. And it's like, you remember, and but that's just that's how Coach Holtz was. This guy wasn't even one of his players. And he remembers kind of the situation, or even, a little bit more recently than that. I was just talking to one of my buddies, Mike Brown, who was the first black and only black leprechaun at Notre Dame. He wasn't here when Holtz was here, but I think he got here like maybe Coach Davies' first or second year. But out of the blue, this Mike gets this letter from South Carolina football. He opens it up, and it's Lou Holtz congratulating him for being the first black leprechaun in Notre Dame. Nothing to do with football. Didn't know Mike Brown from Mike Smith. And it's just one of those crazy situations that, kind of goes beyond the X's and O's that we know who Coach Holtz is. And so when you say, what do you remember? It's those things that, I've heard thousands of random stories that people kind of share this, and it's great. And hey, he wasn't perfect. I mean, he yelled at me. I was upset with him. I got mad at him. And, guys who didn't play were upset with him. But, 5, 10, 20 years later, you realize that all he was doing was teaching us life lessons. It wasn't about, hey, you're a starter or you need to start against Pittsburgh. It's the life lessons that he was able to teach us over the years.
A few years ago, I had the chance to do an interview with Coach Holtz, and one of the questions I had asked him was, of all of your players, who's the one guy that sometimes you just wanted to, and who do you think that he said?
Definitely not me.
It was definitely
No, are you serious?
Chris Zorich. Yes, it was, and it was really
That's
cute.
crazy.
He joked. He said, "Oh, Chris, he would give me a hard time, and I would get on him, but he said, he would do anything for you, and you'd do anything for him, and you guys had a really special relationship."
Like, I got the chills. That's crazy. I mean, I don't know if you can tell, but over my shoulder there's a photo of us during a game, and Coach Holtz is telling us how much he loves me, but no, that's actually not me. He's yelling at me because I probably just got kicked out, and he's like, "What are you doing? We need you in the game. What are you doing?" But to kind of hear that story is just amazing. And for me, it's like, where would I be without Coach Holtz? And yes, he's just a coach of a football team, but I had my choice to go a couple different places, but I chose Notre Dame because of Notre Dame and Coach Holtz. And, you fast forward 35, 40 years, and what he taught us still resonates with choosing a spouse, having a family, running a business, coaching high school kids. I mean, a lot of guys went into coaching and they used the same philosophy that he drilled in us to coach their teams. I've told the story about how I had a severe stuttering problem as a kid growing up. My mom and I would read together. And I went to public school, so maybe I saw speech therapists like maybe once every couple of months, whatever. That didn't work out. So I'm at Notre Dame, I'm quiet, really not talking to people. And make a long story short, he sends me over to St. Mary's to meet the speech therapist. So meet with her 3 or 4 times a week, whatever. So again, long story short, obviously I don't have the starting problem anymore. Never talked about it. During COVID, I had a podcast like everybody else did. And he's on there, we're talking, and we're about to, finish the podcast. I'm like, "Coach, I just got one more question, or one more thing I want to say. Thank you so much. You probably don't remember this, but explain the story." He started laughing. I'm like, "What's up?" He's like, "Well, actually, we had to petition the NCAA because they considered that like a fringe benefit or a benefit that wasn't allowed for everybody." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Oh yeah, we had to fight to get that." And I'm sitting there, tears are just flowing. I'm like, "What? You never said anything." He was like, "But I mean, that's who he is, right? I mean, that's who he was." And so when you look at kind of what he did on the field is one thing, but what he did for us, and that's just my story. There's 1,000, every player that he's had, I'm sure has a story like that. where he's done something that he may have never talked about before or no one else knew about. And for him to do that, I mean, you think really about what he did for me. I mean, if you can't talk, you can't communicate, I mean, you can't get your point across. I mean, you look almost like you're, not fit for our society if you can't speak. So think what that did for me and how thankful and then this was my freshman year. It wasn't like, I was a two-time All-American. I was, college football Hall of Famer. I was holding a bag in practice. Like, of course, being cynical, I think, well, he knew, hey, I was going to college football Hall of Fame, I was going to go with the Bears. Look, he's not a mind reader. I mean, he was a lot of things. He wasn't a fortune teller. So he didn't know, but he did that. He didn't have to do it, but he did. And so those are the memories that I think about that go beyond just the X's and O's.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, and that goes to show that he would do anything to help you guys and to be a part of your lives. And that is from all of the opportunities I've had of talking with him and talking with so many other players. It's always about, not just what he was teaching you on the field, but those life lessons. Is there anything that you remember that he told you that maybe you still carry with you to this day, or that you hope to, as you now sort of live in his, honor and do things in his honor moving forward?
Well, on our national championship rings, it's trust, love, and commitment. We're 18 years old and he's talking about, well, you need to love this guy. I'm like, I don't even know. I'm 18. Like, I'm a dude. I'm from South Side of Chicago. Like, I'm a rough and tough guy. You talking about loving somebody? What? Like, I love my mom. What are you talking about? But those are the lessons that you may not sink in when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, but it's later on in life. And I talked about, having better relationships. You automatically think, well, hey, can I trust you? Are you committed to us? Do I love you? I mean, these are things, again, that help you out in relationships, help you out in life, not just like banding together to win a game, to win a national championship. These are things that guys live by. And knowing that, yes, I mean, he was a father figure to me. I didn't have a dad, but, I didn't spend 24 hours a day with them. People are shocked, like, matter of fact, like, I didn't want to do anything to piss him off. I didn't want to be in his office, if I wasn't the starting quarterback. Like, I'm sure Tony Rice has some great stories, but, he was a starting quarterback. I was on the other side of the ball. Like, I didn't even want him to come to our side of the practice, because if he did, that means that, we screwed up or something. So just knowing that he was always there. And our relationship got a hell of a lot better after I left, because then, and it's funny, like I've talked about this, how a couple of years after graduation, I met with him, we had dinner, and I was like, Coach, hey, I want to tell you something. He started laughing. I was like, what's up? He's like, well, I know what you're going to say. I'm like, no, you don't. He's like, you wish you would have listened more. I'm like, yes, what the hell? Like, yeah. He's like, Chris, everybody says that. I'm like, what? He's like, but that's why he ingrains it. That's why everybody can recite like what it means and what's important now and all the sayings that he has, because this is what he taught us that was beyond X's and O's. Like, hey, we're only going to be with him for 4 years. Like, he was preparing us for life, yet we didn't know it. So.
And just the last one, I know to wrap it up, but do you have, a funny story or a favorite story or something that just stands out that you can share with us that you can, when you think about Coach Holtz, that's not the emotional, but more lighthearted and fun?
I mean, yeah, I mean, he threw me out of practice numerous times. I was trying to take somebody's head off or grab the football when I was supposed to. I mean, those are the stories, but the one thing that like kind of impressed me the most about kind of him not saying anything to me was, about 15 years ago, somebody came up to me and said, hey, I didn't know you cried after the Texas A&M game. And I'm like, the hell are you talking about? What? He's like, go read Coach Holtz's book. Well, literally, I did not read Coach Holtz's book, so I apologize about that. Right? I don't read my coach's books. Like, again, I'm a guy, right? I just didn't do that. So went to the book and I read it. And I was like, oh my God. So apparently, freshman year, holding the bags, really didn't do much. the players that did well, who traveled the team, they went to the bowl game a week before. Well, us scrubs, we went there like 3 days before the game. So we wound up losing the game. I'm in the locker room crying because I think that I didn't do my job, which was to help the offensive line, starting offensive line, get better. Didn't play it down, didn't really do anything, crying in the locker room. And apparently in the book, Winning Every Day or something like that, Coach Holtz mentioned and said, I knew at that point I wanted to get fire eaters like Chris Zorich on the field because he has that passion. He has what I want our team to believe in, to have that passion. And I was a kid who was holding a dummy, right? And so then, he talked about how he molded a team around people like me. I mean, that's mind blowing. Like, he didn't come up and goes, hey, Chris, I think you're going to be great, blah, blah. He didn't say anything. So again, it was one of those stories, and it's crazy. So like the first time I ever played at Notre Dame, I was playing against Michigan my sophomore year, never played at all. And this is kind of a funny story. So the week of practice, he calls me in his office, says, hey, they're all American centers, been talking a lot of trash about you in the media. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, he's saying you're a no-name guy, you're short, what's going on? Allison, game time, I'm like, snot bubbles are coming out of my mouth. I'm crying, like I'm out there play. I think I jumped off sides like 5 times or something. I'm in this guy, I'm cursing at him, yelling at him, screaming at him, spitting at him. I'm sure this guy's like, what is going on here? Like, what's going on? And of course, this guy didn't know. I wound up having 10 tackles in like a sack and a half, the first game I had ever played at Notre Dame. And it was because of Coach Holtz. Now, he may have told a little white lie there, but, it was to motivate me. So, and I'm sure that the center guy was like, what the hell is going on here? Crazy.
Well, he knew how to motivate his players, right? That you can say
Yes,
that to say the least. Well, thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed your stories and watching your relationship with Coach Holtz over the years. And so we send you our love and our condolences, and really thank you for sharing your story with us tonight.